Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michelle Easton, president of the Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute, and I'm so delighted to invite you here to our March Conservatives Women's Network to welcome you. And special thanks to Bridget Wagner here with the Heritage Foundation. We've been putting on these monthly lunches for a lot of years now, and it's such a treat to work with you, Bridget, and the Heritage Foundation. Now I'm pleased to introduce you to today's speaker, Lila Rose. Lila is the president of LiveAction, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ending abortion and building a culture of life. Lila founded LiveAction when she was 15 years old and has been working relentlessly ever since to defend our society's most vulnerable and defenseless, the unborn. As president of LiveAction, Lila leads undercover investigations that expose the corruption of the abortion industry. LiveAction also focuses on educating young people across the country using its student magazine in-depth education programs also to spread the truth about human dignity and equal protection for all people. They host LiveAction News, a widely read pro-life site, and oversee the largest pro-life social media platform on the web, including over 600,000 Facebook fans and over 30,000 followers on Twitter. Lila is an international public speaker on family and cultural issues and a frequent guest on popular radio and television programs like The O'Reilly Factor, Hannity, and The Laura Ingraham Show. Her work has been featured on practically every news outlet, including CBS, CNN, the Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post. And Lila has other things in her life, too. She likes to play chess. She likes to do yoga. She likes to bake. She loves to travel. And she has 5 brothers and 2 sisters. But 9 of the years, she was the only girl, so that must have been quite fun. Normally, I would just call Lila up, but today we're going to start with a video, a special video that shows the kind of work that Lila and her staff do at LiveAction. So we'll roll that right now.
It's just really hard for me to even ask you this question because I'm almost in disbelief. If a baby is born on a table as a result of a botched abortion, what would Planned Parenthood want to have happen to that child that's struggling for life? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We believe that any decision that's made should be left up to the woman, her family, and the physician.
What happens in a situation where a baby is alive, breathing on a table, moving? What do your physicians do at that point?
You're recognized.
I do not have that information. I am not a physician. I'm not an abortion provider. So I do not have that information.
At this point, does it have like all of its organs and all that stuff? Like, is it already fully
It's not
developed?
fully developed.
Okay.
It doesn't even look like a baby yet.
It doesn't?
Technically, it has its organs. It has parts, like we all have parts, but it's not done.
So like, does it have a face or like all of that stuff? Or?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's developing into.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want you to torture yourself.
So if they use the suction, then there's possible movement when it comes out.
Yeah, and sometimes
Is it alive or?
sometimes they are, yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it will come out whole, because they use suction, plus they use instruments, and sometimes the fetuses don't come out, that's not complete.
Okay.
So,
But if it does
doesn't-
come out whole,
Mhm.
I mean, will they resuscitate it? Like, will I have to take care of it?
Mm-mm.
Okay. If that does happen, like if they do it, if I were to choose to do it that way, like, you would just let it go, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so you would just let it die on its own if it
Mhm.
was whole and breathing. Yes.
They do not resuscitate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let it die on its own and, okay.
And the chances of it coming out with a heartbeat are kind of slim because, like I said, it's a procedure where they use instruments and suction, and it's most of the time they don't come out whole.
Okay.
You know.
But if it does, then I don't have to worry about getting in trouble or taking a baby home.
Oh no.
I understand that you're not a physician, but you do represent
Yes.
physicians who do perform this activity. And can you tell me what happens when a baby is alive on the table? At that point, what do they do with the baby that is struggling to live?
You're recognized.
I don't know, and as it's been referenced earlier, we don't know even how prevalent this situation is.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be with all of you conservative women this afternoon. The video, of course, is a pretty heavy one to watch, and it's a clipped version. The longer version of that same film goes kind of in depth into our investigator who is posing as a woman interested in an abortion. She's actually pregnant. She's 22 to 27 weeks, so we used in this investigation women who are actually entering their last trimester. The children were old enough to survive, technically viable. And if you watch the longer video, it's even more heartbreaking than what we saw because they describe the abortion procedure, which is intended to kill, but sometimes, of course, allows for a child to be born alive, and gets into the exact grotesque details of how it's taking place. We did this video to demonstrate last year that Gosnell, and raise hands for those familiar with Gosnell. He should be a household name for the House of Horrors that he ran in Philadelphia. But we're nearing the anniversary of his conviction, actually, for his crimes, ultimately killing children born outside of the womb. But he was not convicted for killing thousands of children inside the womb. And at the time of the trial last year, which was publicized by some media outlets, but not enough, we were demonstrating with our investigative film and footage that this Gosnell problem, Gosnell is an abortionist, he was not alone, but that there were dozens of other abortionists practicing the same horrific acts across the country. And we put those videos out, and the media was silent. There was really a blackout. There's a famous picture of the courtroom during the trial, and the press section is empty. So we were doing a tweet shaming, and at the same time meeting with reporters, Washington Post, New York Times, sitting down with CNN and showing this other footage to get that out there to demonstrate again that this is an industry-wide problem happening all over the country. But anyways, I want to get a little more into that in a moment, but thank you for having me here, and thanks for inviting me. I'm looking forward to sharing with you a little bit of, first of all, how I got involved, why I'm involved, what LiveAction is and what we do, and then sharing a few comments about this, really how women, I believe, have been used as a bargaining chip in the wrong way in politics, and talking a little bit about how this war on women has been completely misrepresented across the country, and we are the ones who are paying for it, not just the women in this room, but women on both sides of the political aisle, and how we need to get more involved and more vocal than ever before to speak out about how the real war on women is in the person of someone like Tonya Reeves, who was killed at a Planned Parenthood Chicago abortion clinic, hemorrhaging to death, 24 years old. This was a year and a half ago, leaving behind her one-year-old son, Alvin. And those are the stories and the faces that are not being put out there about how the whole system has actually been set up against women, not to empower us, but to hurt us. And that's the programming of a lot of the left today that's really working closely with the abortion industry, with the pharmaceutical companies, I'll mention that, and with others that are actually hurting our sisterhood, hurting us as women. So first off, I'm from California originally. I'm 25. LiveAction started it at 15. Any women from the West Coast here? A few of us. Are we miserable or what in this? Although, as you can see, I'm all like getting out the spring wardrobe. I'm pretending that it's going to get warm. I've heard scary reports that it's going to snow again next week on Tuesday. So I'm trying to devise ways to move to Florida or do something, because this is not my element. When I moved here 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, I was spoiled because the winters were really mild. So I was like, this is not a big deal. And this winter has been obviously crazy, and just after a snowstorm about 2 weeks ago, they had the media advisory or the weather advisory saying don't go out and drive, shut down, everybody shut down. And so I wanted to go run an errand, and I was thinking, you know what, they make such a big deal about the snow here in DC, they're wimps. This is a California girl that doesn't know what she's talking about. I'll prove the point in a minute. So I go on my little Hyundai Elantra, this little car that's 2-wheel drive, and I'm driving on the roads, and there's snow. It's so pretty. There's no one on the road. I'm thinking that the trucks are just coming out to plow the streets. I'm thinking this is so fun, and I'm kind of laughing to myself like, wow, I am. These people are wimps. Here I am driving. It's no problem. 60 seconds after literally laughing to myself aloud in the car, I ram into the only other car on the road. Basically, almost a head-on collision, and thankfully I was fine. The other driver was fine. My car, not has seen far better days, but I definitely learned my lesson, and the pride does come before the fall. So I will not be driving after a snowstorm again. But anyways, moved here to start LiveAction headquarters here. We have a team out in California and all over the country, but I got involved and became so passionate about this issue, about pro-life, not just because it's another political or conservative issue, not because I came into it thinking, I want to be an activist, so what's the issue I'm going to pick, but because at a young age I felt strongly that there was no more important issue, and I'll explain. So as was mentioned, I'm one of 8 kids, 5 brothers, 2 sisters. There were a lot of babies in the house growing up. Children were an exciting thing, but my parents weren't really activists, so I didn't necessarily, or pro-life activists at that, I didn't really have a strong feeling about abortion so much until I was about 9 years old, and I came across a book in my parents' home on some bottom shelf called A Handbook on Abortion by Dr. and Mrs. Wilkie. Long story short, I opened this book up, and I'm confronted with the image of a child in the first trimester, maybe 10 weeks old, newly forming arms and legs, a newly forming face that had been the victim of a first trimester abortion. And ladies, after seeing that image, and anyone who's seen an image like this, I was cut to the core. I mean, I'm 9, so I have no filters, right? I'm looking at it straight as a human, looking at a little human who's victimized. I'm not thinking in terms of political points. I'm not thinking in terms of pro-choice, pro-life. I'm just thinking, this is wrong. How can this be happening? I learned that there's over 3,000 of these happening a day in our country legally, over 1 million a year. Within 10 miles of my childhood home at the time in San Jose, California, there's a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, open for business, killing up to past 30 children a day, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, almost 100 children a week. And as a young girl entering into my teens, I just thought, what are we doing about this? How can we be allowing this? It was just a very almost naive approach, but innocent approach to this question of this atrocity happening in our midst. And I became aware, I was very interested in other issues, political issues, social issues, human rights issues. We know there's AIDS crisis in Africa, there's homelessness here in the country, there's poverty problems, there's human rights abuses that are happening. I mean, we learn about these things. You turn on the television and you hear about another crisis, and it can be pretty depressing, and the world seems to be full of problems and crises everywhere we turn. But I kept coming back to the image of that child as I entered my teen years and wanted to do something meaningful with my life, because I came across the writings of Blessed Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and many of you, I'm sure, have seen her, and she's a world hero. Forget political affiliation, everyone loves her. She gets a Nobel Peace Prize winner, expert on peace. This little nun, if she was here, she wouldn't even see over the podium. And she had very brave and bold words to say whenever she had the opportunity to speak publicly, which she had many opportunities, about abortion. And at the National Prayer Breakfast in front of Bill and Hillary Clinton, who were not so much in line, shall we say, with our cause, and who, when I was growing up, were mentioned at the dinner table kind of like a bad word or something, the Clintons, and I was always wondering, who are these mysterious Clintons that are going to come get me at night? But anyways, that was my kind of beginning of entry into politics. But she directed these words to this audience, which of course would be hostile. She says to them, this expert on peace, the greatest destroyer of peace in the world today is the cry of the innocent unborn child. And then she goes on to say, in a nation where a mother can kill her own child, what is left but for you and for I to kill one another? Because that most intimate bond is broken, is shattered. And there's now, in our country, powerful political corporate interests that are breaking that bond down further and that are turning women against their children in the name of freedom, in the name of empowerment, in the name of choice. words that sound great, words that should be ours. We believe in freedom, right? We believe in true empowerment of the person to be who they're meant to be able to discover the path that is for them, to make their decisions, their choices. But that has been the brand that has been applied to this great atrocity. And when you think about human rights, the first right, of course, is life, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you deny that fundamental right, all other rights then are become meaningless because you can't enjoy them. And when you deny that right to the weakest members of our society, because think, who is weaker than the unborn child? The preborn child who has no opportunity or power to defend him or herself, who has no voice literally, whose little vocal cords aren't even developed yet until into the, past the first trimester. That is the most unprotected members, unprotected people group in our country and in our world, and they're killed by the millions across the world every year. So all of these things were percolating. Started LiveAction with some friends in my living room. I started to pray. I'm a Christian. I wanted to give my life to God. I asked God, I said, God, use me. Use me to do something for your purposes here. Use me to do something for life. And it's very dangerous to ever ask God, as some of you may know, people of faith, to ask God to use you, because I believe that as much as there are political, social battles happening, it's a spiritual battle, and God is keenly interested in every aspect of our human affairs. And he's not to be sectioned off out of politics and just left at the door of our homes or our churches, but he's meant to be brought in because his natural law, which he established, which teaches us about human rights, is what is higher than government. So when government takes control and violates those natural laws and those human rights, that's where we need to call out a higher power and say there is something more here, and you cannot do that. You cannot call the child non-human. This child is a human, and to be human is enough. To be human should secure you a place of protection and your human rights in any society. So starting LiveAction, zoom forward, I went to UCLA, really pro-life school. You can laugh. Chose it for the pro-life major. I'm joking. My mom jokes I majored in pro-life because I spent more time doing pro-life work than in class. Thank God I did graduate. I have my diploma, so I made it through. But I was obviously wanting to shake things up and say, how can we get the pro-life message out here? Quickly realized there's another group on campus, and there's another group politically and nationally, internationally, very powerful with their own message for women. And that, of course, is Planned Parenthood and their friends at NARAL Now, and you name it. Emily's List, you name it. And what this group is working to do is somehow sell to women that abortion is empowering, and abortion is necessary, and abortion is even something that's going to help them achieve what they want to achieve in their life. But what has really happened is abortion has become a tool in the hands of university professors who won't pass their pregnant students or be flexible with them. It's become a tool in the hands of bosses who won't be flexible with their employees or with their female employees, and so they're afraid of not being promoted. It's become a tool in the hands of boyfriends or even abusive partners who say you have to have an abortion, or fearful parents who are afraid of stigma. It's become a tool in the hands of everyone but the woman, who really, at the end of the day, if you asked her and sat her down in a room and said, if it was possible to achieve what you wanted to achieve and to have the relationships you wanted to have, would you kill this child? I mean, if it was possible to not have to kill the child, to have those things, would you still kill the child? And I think I'm going to just go on a limb and say pretty much everyone would say, no, I don't want the abortion. I feel I have to have the abortion. But somehow, abortion has been sold to us as empowerment. And that's one of the first biggest lies, I believe, the rhetoric that underlies the war on women rhetoric, which has sadly been used as a tool to even win elections as of late. And I say you're going to lose, you're going to miss every shot you don't take. And when our side, conservative politicians who are pro-life, who believe in the dignity of the human person, who believe in human rights for the child, who believes in loving both the child and the woman and serving and protecting both of them, when they don't engage the message, when they don't fight and talk about the abuses of the abortion industry and how women, we should find positive solutions for them and we should respect both the life of the child and the mother, then we will lose that issue in the election. Then we will lose it with the public, and we will not move forward. We will not be winning, we will be losing. So a couple other quick notes. You saw the video just about what LiveAction's up to right now. Our group is fairly new in many ways. We've been working now for a several years since I was 15, but as a national group really for 4 or 5 years. And we specialize in educational campaigns, and a lot of that has been investigative journalism, but it's more than that. It's messaging. It's messaging, creating databases or platforms where we can reach millions of people and then messaging them to them in a way that's powerful. It's amazing to read the polling. The majority of Americans consider themselves pro-life to some degree, or they want some restrictions on abortion. It's actually a supermajority want some kind of restrictions on abortion. And more Americans actually say they're pro-life than they say that they're pro-choice. But when you ask those same groups when you're doing the polling, how many people do you think are pro-life versus pro-choice? Hands down, they'll think that there's actually more pro-choice people than there are pro-life people. And I don't know how you feel, but when you're just kind of meeting with friends and maybe they're not all conservative or not all pro-life, sometimes we almost feel a little bit like scared to bring up our issue because we think so many people don't agree with us. And people say to me, oh, how did you make it at UCLA? And they didn't kill you or kick you out because, you're pro-life. And I'd say, you know what? A lot more people there were pro-life than you would think. And a lot more people there wanted to identify with our message when it was given to them in a way that they could actually relate to and understand. And that, I think, is the power. And what we're working to do at LiveAction is developing multifaceted, multimedia campaigns using traditional media, using social media, online media, our news website, youth outreach, women's outreach, to demonstrate that this message is something that really appeals to the heart. I mean, I think we have it in spades. Every woman, if they could choose, would choose not to have an abortion if they thought that they could find a way to make it work. I've even said, if I was sitting in a room with Cecile Richards, the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood. This is a $1 billion organization. Ladies, they're the biggest abortion proponent. They do over 330,000 abortions every year in our country. They get $500 million from the government, from their friends in the White House. And I've said this to BBC recently, if I was sitting down with Cecile Richards, I bet, and I asked her, if it was possible to have a world without abortion, if it was possible, would you want to live in that world as opposed to one with it? And I want to, give her the major benefit of the doubt. I think she'd say yes. Because at the heart of it, everybody recognizes deep down there's something wrong with the killing of the child. Even if they won't call it that, there's something wrong with it. So if we can develop that sentiment more, and that's what LiveAction is working to do, if we can develop that sentiment more so people can identify and relate to that, and then give them basic intellectual formation. You've probably talked with folks who say, I'm pro-life, but what about rape? I'm pro-life, but what about incest or life health of the mother? And so there's these little things like scarecrows in our heads that are preventing us or some of our friends from actually really embracing the pro-life identity because they feel like they have to make some compromises. And those compromises become the foundation for all of the compromises politically, for 1 million abortions a year, for exporting abortions to other countries, you name it. And so addressing those tough questions and saying, actually, when you give a rape victim is a victim of rape, that woman deserves our help, our healing, counseling, everything. The rapist needs to be held accountable. But the solution to her problem is not to give her experience another trauma, another violent act. And the violence of that abortion is not going to undo the violence of the rape. It's not going to unrape her. It's going to add more violence on top of that first violence. And then, of course, what about the rights of the child? And so talking to people about this, and then this idea that women need abortion because of health. And you look at Ireland, which has had without abortion for years, and they just are making compromises now, but for years they didn't have it. One of the lowest maternal mortality rates in the world, lower than the United States. One of the safest places to be a mother, to be pregnant. And their Dublin Declaration, over 100 OBGYN Irish doctors saying abortion is never medically necessary. Abortion is not a treatment to medical problems. Abortion only adds more risk and more problems to the pre-existing condition, et cetera. And you can treat a woman and treat the child too and work to love them both and care for them both. So getting those messages out there, I think is crucial. I want to say one other thing about the war on women. I mentioned that earlier. All of this is important as far as explaining why our position is the one that is the most compelling. It's the one that is the most human and compassionate. It's the one that's the most just. It cares about human rights. But also this whole spin of rhetoric about the war on women and this idea, I know birth control has been injected into the discussion again and again. Well, women need birth control and the government should pay for it. But even examining that and breaking that down, Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest promoters of abortion on demand, anytime, anywhere, any reason, and birth control. And one of the things that is just emerging is the dangers of hormone drugs, as I call them. the Yaz pill, one of the most popular pills of the last several years. And us ladies, we deserve to know this stuff for our health. It was something that 10,000 women now have banded together to sue the company and try to say this has caused strokes, death, mental health problems, disorders. The NuvaRing, heavily promoted by Planned Parenthood. Vanity Fair just did an expose of the NuvaRing, demonstrating how that actually killed a woman here in the DC area and exposing its dangers. So this whole discussion has been holding up hormone drugs that the government should pay for, abortions, and they do want the government to pay for that too, as empowering for women, as good for women, and the health risks, of course, the human rights concerns with abortion, and the problems with these things, and the question of is this really empowering women? Are women really being treated now with the respect and the dignity that they deserve? And are we really talking about positive policies to help us have the careers, the families, the lives that we want, and to be able to accommodate our desire to also have children and be mothers? Because we all have they talk about the biological clock, and deep down, even though society has largely rejected it, there's this wanting to be a mother. Being a mother is a beautiful thing. It should be something that's celebrated and not looked down on, and a woman's fertility should not be something that's looked on as a sickness or a threat, but as something that is powerful and wonderful in and of itself, that we can become more aware of and understand, but that the solution to that, as they say, the problem of our fertility, you can have a baby, isn't to just give us synthetic hormones or say, here's an abortion, now move on, but to really look at us and say, how are we going to treat you with holistically as a woman to really, truly empower you? So all of those messages, I think, are essential to tackling a lot of this highly charged, completely false rhetoric coming from the left about what it means to be a woman, about what women care about what is empowering to women, and debunking the mythology of abortion and debunking the mythology of the so-called women rights advocates on the left. As we know with Claire Luce Booth and with all of the feminists that were the founding feminists, Susan B. Anthony, etc., they are women that actually wanted to empower us to be able to be mothers, to be able to succeed in the workforce, to be able to vote, of course, but they didn't see abortion and they didn't see our fertility as threats, and they didn't see our children as threats, and they found a way, how can we love them both? How can we be truly empowered to live out our full potential? And I think that's the kind of rhetoric we need to turn to, and we need to reject and speak out, just straight out speak out against the false rhetoric that's coming from the left right now in the War on Women meme. So in all of this, I really hope that not just with election cycles, but in our personal lives, in our friendships, in our families. I have the stereotypical, liberal uncle, liberal grandpa. I mean, there's always someone in our life, but to engage them and to say, what is really going to empower women? What is really going to help us achieve our potential? And what is really just? Justice is key here, and of course, mercy, love. How can we really help people reach their potential? And having that discussion and being unafraid. I think that's the biggest message I want to leave all of us with, is to be proud of our positions, to be proud of our stance for the human rights of the child and for true dignity and empowerment of the woman, and to be unafraid to speak that wherever we go and to engage this issue. I think this is the most important issue of the day, the right to life for all people. And when that's under threat, it needs to be brought up again and again, front and center. And us as women, especially in today's climate, there's no better people than us to bring it up and to speak our minds at this time. So thank you so much for having me. I think we have some time for questions.
It's hard to imagine somebody 25 years has already accomplished so much for the good in your life. You're truly an inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And we have a couple of mics here. And if you would, I'll let you call on people, okay?
Okay, sure, yeah.
If
Sounds
you would
good.
not mind giving your name and your affiliation so we can know who you are, and we'll just take a few.
Great, thank
Thanks.
you. Okay.
Hi, my name is Alexa. I'm here with the Heritage Foundation as an intern. And I'm wondering if you have focused more on influencing culture or influencing politics to be effective for your cause.
Thanks, Alexa. Great question. More focused on politics or culture? And we are adamantly first focused on culture, focused on reaching somebody and getting a message to them that can shift the way that they feel or think about these issues. And that in turn will influence politics. And I think that we in DC, get in our little beltway mentality, which can be good and bad, but about, politics and fighting these good fights. And these fights need to be fought, of course. But I think that you look at the Romney campaign, we invested, not as if I did it personally, but $1 billion in Romney's campaign was invested, as many of you may know. $1 billion. Did any of that money actually move people's opinion one way or another? Or was it just trying to mobilize or reach people or try to convince them, I'm not so bad after all, Obama is bad. But did it really persuade folks? Imagine if we invested $1 billion in persuading people to understand the life of the child. Abortion's not necessary, abortion's not good, and there's something better for women and for our society. Imagine the amazing strides that we could make. So I think it has to come to education first. We are ruthlessly focused on education. LiveAction is just getting started. We're developing some major national and even some international strategies to persuasively message to certain groups, whether they're women, young people, Hispanics. I think that, Latinas, I think that especially with young people, keep in mind, the 16-year-olds of today will be 18 in a couple years in 2016, and they'll be voters. So messaging to our young people who are already naturally predisposed to be pro-life. You ask any kid about abortion, they're like, that sounds terrible, that's bad. And really, there's something that's because it's true. Because you'd ask anybody common sense, is it okay to kill a baby or have an abortion? And they say, no, it's not. And you talk to women who've had abortions and they've been through so much grief, and they share, some of them who are brave advocates now, how it didn't help them, it only hurt them. They become some of our best advocates. And it's amazing to see that when you really empower that position and that feeling, that sentiment, you can really make huge efforts in the voting booth and beyond. Yes.
I'm Ashley, and I work on Capitol Hill. And I'm from Arkansas, but I don't like Clinton, so please don't hold it against me. I went to a private Christian school where I'm sure the pro-life feeling was, prevalent. But I tried to get involved with a pro-life group, and we couldn't get anybody to participate. And so, do you have any advice on how you get people fired up who are pro-life?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's actually interesting you mentioned that. And what was the name again? What was your name again? Ashley. It's interesting you mentioned that because it's funny. It's at some of the more conservative, pro-life or Catholic Christian schools, it's almost harder, I've heard, to mobilize or get a sense for the strengths in some cases than at like UCLA, where we had a pro-life group and we were running around like crazy. And I think it's because we have to do a couple of things. First of all, folks may say that they're pro-life, but what does that really mean to them? Have they had an emotional encounter with the issue to the point where they feel that they feel compelled to do something? And the sad truth is a lot of them maybe don't. They just kind of think, oh, it's another political issue. Yeah, of course I'm pro-life, I'm against that, it sounds bad, but that's not personal to them. And maybe it becomes personal, even tragically later in their life, but it's not personal to them in that moment. So I think part of what we have to do is succeed in making it personal. And one of that way is, I think, through storytelling, videos, our investigative videos make it very personal. This is happening, in your state. This is happening down the street. Also, I think a powerful role, especially for college campuses, is the use of imagery of the victims of abortion. That will get anybody upset, whether they're upset for the right reason or not. Sometimes they're just upset you showed it to them. But to say, this is what's happening, this is actually the victim. When you hide the victim, it's easy for the atrocity to continue. That's historically the truth with all human rights abuses. When you don't show the victim and the victim's hidden, then it's easy for it to continue. People won't accept that it's happening. So I think just reconnecting people to it, and then prioritizing it is another key, because again, we have a lot of issues. Turn on the TV and there's so many issues that we face, personally, politically, socially. But when in a nation, as Mother Teresa says, if you allow a mother to kill her own child, you even encourage that. What's left for you and I to kill one another? And I think we have to reposition it where it should be, as this human rights abuse of the highest degree, the most extreme degree, because you're killing the weakest member of society, and it's the strong against the weak, and it's their first right that's being denied them, that's being stripped from them. So hopefully that helps. And afterwards, we have a table, and we do connect with a lot of youth resources for college and high schools. And so we have some, I don't know if you have friends at the school, but we have a lot of ideas for how to shake things up. That's what controversy is good, get people thinking and feeling and upset.
Hi, I'm Melody Scally with Heritage Action. I cover the Mid-Atlantic region, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about pastors and churches, and that they seem to have abdicated the role that they should be playing to protect the most innocent. And how do you reach them?
Yeah.
And I've personally talked to pastors who will say to you, well, it should be the woman's choice?
It's a great question. What do we do about the church? And I've talked with a lot of folks over the years, and they say, if the church is silent, we can't win. If people of faith who say they're people of faith and even attend religious services don't do anything, and by the way, they're voting for Obama, they're even complicit in abortions, or they're approving of them, or they're not actively addressing the needs of their congregation, so that women there are feeling like they're going to face massive stigma and not be supported if they do choose life. I mean, talk about creating a climate of fear for them instead of a climate of nurturing and a positive climate. So what I've seen is there are some very brave pastors that are out there speaking out, and we work with some of them, we talk with them, we try to get them more resources, encourage them. But I think we have to just have a strategic approach to message to the church and to empower individual Christians, if not the pastor, because sometimes the church has to lead, the people have to lead, if not the pastor. Empower them to stand up and say, as people of faith, regardless even of the faith background, this issue is front and center, and getting them to identify and lead with it. And it's really, I think it comes down to getting them something that will connect with their heart, emotional, to connect them with this issue. They're already connected, but connecting them more deeply, and then enough intellectual formation so that when they're talking with someone or they're going to the voting booth, they're not going to just break down and say, well, in some exceptions it's okay, or, it bothers me, I wouldn't have an abortion, right? I'm personally against it, but I can't tell anyone else what to do. So giving them enough of the formation so that they're able to feel bold, and they want to be, united as part of the movement, and they're bold and able to go out and speak. So totally agree. It's a massive area of unreached people. And they say, well, that's preaching to the choir. Well, if your choir doesn't sing very well, no one wants to come to church, right? So it's really about getting our message out. And in LiveAction, in our educational strategy, we've identified, and the left does this very well, 5 spheres of society. And religion or faith is one of them. And we have to work in that sphere with the leaders and also just with the grassroots, with the people, to get them compelling messages. Yes, Jenny.
It's just so great to listen to you. You're right. She's so inspirational. So you're so effective. I have to believe the left is hitting back at you. Talk about the pushback that you get for doing what you're doing and what we can learn. How do you get through that?
Sure. Well, the pushback, it's always funny to see a Jezebel article. I don't know if you know, our RH Reality Checker, Huffington Post, about our work, or some personal smear attack. I'm definitely familiar with those. And we've received, our share of the hate mail or, even threats in the past. But overall, it's been overwhelmingly positive. Again, I think it's part of the mythology of the left and of the abortion industry and of Planned Parenthood and these groups that they've got the majority, right? That they have the people of America are on their side, the women of America, they speak for them, but it's not true. And when you tackle that directly by being fearless and speaking your mind, which is actually the mind of most people, even if they're afraid to say it, then it's amazing how many friends you make, actually. And so I'm happy to say we enjoy so much more support than, anti-support than the negative, and we're really it's a growing movement here. So, and when you make people upset, if you make people upset because you're speaking the truth in a way that's gracious, but you're being unafraid, you're probably doing something right. Because if you're out there campaigning for something or speaking for something and nobody is saying anything, that may be because, are you really getting the message home? Are you being daring enough? And one of our big philosophies at LiveAction is risk taking, knowing the risks you're taking, calculating them, but taking risks in speaking out and allowing that controversy, because that's what's going to get people woken up in a time where everyone is either silent or they're just listening to this other position. Yes, yeah. Right. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Okay, great.
My name is Beth. I'm a graduate student at George Washington University.
Awesome.
And I would like to know if you have any projects planned in the future with James O'Keefe. I know that you started a lot of significant video work with him a long time ago. I was wondering if you were planning anything with him in the future.
Sure, yeah. So 5 or 6 years ago, we did, when I was at UCLA, we did couple projects together. So we no longer work together on projects. I know he's working on a lot of initiatives and efforts, and some of you may have seen some some of them have been very successful. So, he's focused on some other things. Our focus is really on culture of life and human rights issues, particularly with regard to the child and the woman. So that's really our we believe is front and center and most important. Yes.
My name's Karen. I'm an intern here at Heritage, and as a sister of someone who has Down syndrome, I was wondering if the pro-life movement or what you're doing at LiveAction has done any research or I guess advocacy towards just the dignity of human life. Because there's abortion providers and doctors who will kind of hint at and encourage, aborting a child who has been tested for special needs.
Yes, great question. Yeah, we are certainly, and your sister's a little angel. Today, actually, and as you may know, this week is National Down Syndrome Awareness or Celebration Week and Day. So it's a time to celebrate these little angels among us. And the tragic statistic, as you may be aware of, is over 90% of couples that test for Downs and they discover their child has Down syndrome, they kill them, they abort them. And it's heartbreaking, and it's unjust. I mean, it's a huge injustice. So we definitely educate about that. We're regularly writing, reporting on that. It deserves more attention. It deserves its own campaign, national and even international media campaign, because these are, precious lives that are being ruthlessly, it's like Nazi Germany. He went after the Jews, the disabled, folks that he didn't think were good enough. And that's part of the underlying philosophy, agenda of the abortion industry. Actually, it was founded by Margaret Sanger, who, as many of you may know, she was a self-proclaimed eugenicist. She was pen-paling with the same eugenicists in Nazi Germany who were creating the final solution plan to kill off millions of Jews, and she wanted to use birth control and sterilization at the time and later abortion to limit and to control minority populations and those that she thought were unfit. Well, look what's happened, how abortion has been a tool. So absolutely, it's extremely a great injustice, tragedy, and we need to be talking more about it. And children with disabilities, girls are being targeted in the womb just because they're girls. We did a whole campaign on that a couple years ago. Sex-selective abortion is a huge problem. There's over 100 million missing girls in India and Africa, or India and China right now, as you may know, and all over the world. They're being targeted, even in the U.S. And we documented Planned Parenthood aiding and abetting late-term sex-selective abortions on tape. Again, this is the group that claims to speak for women. So it's an important issue that deserves more attention. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Brave man to be here.
Ms. Rose, thank you for your time and presentation and for coming today. My name is Joshua. I'm the health policy intern here. My question relates to Karen's. I got to watch several of the videos on your website. There are a lot from mid to southwest Virginia, and I know that Roanoke, Charlottesville, Richmond, all of those, in addition to having active Planned Parenthood sites, also have big medical schools and hence teaching hospitals. So what would the ethical considerations be to ever trying to take the same approach of getting undercover video if you were to try to go into a genetic counselor's office and get them talking to parents saying,
turn off the camera, guys, this is a good idea now.
Sure.
Yeah.
But as she mentioned, anyone with Down syndrome, et cetera, Prader-Willi syndrome, different types of autism now are being included. They're saying this will cause bankruptcy, divorce, you're going to have all kinds of
and a lot of the time
problems.
they're, along the time what they say what they say the disability is, or the fear they have for the child, they're wrong. And the children actually are healthy, or they're born healthy, or they recover quickly, or there's a surgery they can take, or whatever. So there's a lot of fear mongering, sadly, among the medical establishment in the United States, because abortion, there's money involved, and it's more risky and dangerous. There's lawsuits. It's complicated to carry to term, and so they think, well, let's just abort and just move on and get pregnant again. Try again. So I think there's a huge rich area for research there, investigative, undercover, and otherwise. It's a huge area that needs study. So again, what I say sometimes to our team at LiveAction and to other leaders in the movement, we are operating at 5%. And sometimes they get upset, or sometimes they like it when I say this, meaning everyone's been doing amazing work. There's a lot of folks working out there for this cause, but altogether our efforts, I believe, are at 5% at what they should be. Maybe our political efforts are at 7%, but our educational efforts are less than 5%. I mean, it's amazing what people don't know about this issue. What people don't even know Planned Parenthood does abortions. a lot of Americans. People don't know what an abortion does to a child. People don't know how many abortions happen a day. Those basics, and then you get deeper and about the disability issue and sex selection and the targeting children because they're the wrong, even they have a medical condition, whatever. All of that deserves to be brought front and center and put in front of people. So, yeah.
Maybe one more or two more here, maybe?
Okay.
Finish with these two?
Hi, I'm Debbie, and I'm from Virginia. I don't know, but I have 2 points. One, and I'll try to be real brief. We can talk afterwards if you'd like. You mentioned messaging, and it's so important. A consistent message replicated over and over and over. That's what Obama used to win. One of the things that you might consider, as we talked about Nazi Germany, that woman you mentioned, and how people are aghast at what Nazi Germany did, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they saw the relationship between that and what's happening now, that could be a hook. The other thing is when people want to have abortions because they want to have, maybe a better relationships or more relationships, all that kind of stuff. It is the same thing as pagan communities sacrificing their children to the gods for fertility of the lands. And people would definitely abhor that. So why can't they abhor abortion? That's point number one. Point number two is you mentioned Mother Teresa, and I think it was the Clinton's speech. I vaguely remember her saying to the United States, don't kill your children, I will adopt them. Am I right? Something like that?
Yeah, she said that a lot. She would say, if you want to kill the child, you don't want the child. I want the child. Give me the child.
Give me the child. Give me the child.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my second point. My second point is, how easy is it to adopt a child in the United States?
Great question. Yeah. So I think this is a huge area where if the left really cared about women and children, they would be talking about reforming and improving the adoption system, because there are hundreds of thousands of couples in our country who want to adopt but are on waiting lists or they're stuck in bureaucracy. There's a shortage of children because we're aborting them. So connecting more, and by the way, every time we've come across an alert, this baby's going to be aborted, but the parents are open to giving it up. Are there anybody that wants the baby? We sometimes get these alerts. Or the baby has Down syndrome. Hundreds of people, of couples with other children, healthy families line up for these children. These are just like word of mouth emails. I mean, there's waiting lists already out there, through adoption agencies. So it's a huge area for reform, for improvement, and also just to publicize that there are hundreds of thousands of couples waiting for children that don't have them yet because they're not there available yet. And that's because there's a shortage. So that's can you believe it, right? There's a shortage of our children because they're being killed. So it's something that there needs to be a lot more awareness around. And I say, if you want to empower women and children, don't invest your money in hormone drugs and abortions and Planned Parenthood, which is all that they do, but invest it in improving employment policies at the local level, invest it in improving the foster care system, the adoption system, invest them in, finding actually medical solutions to maybe tubal pregnancies and things like that are actually hurting women and something that will foster and promote life. So I think it's a great question and a huge, huge opportunity.
All right, last question.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Fight, and I'm with Profound Promises. I guess every time there's an abortion, I know there really are two victims, and you have sometimes made a mention of the fact that the woman is also a victim. And I mean, obviously, I think all of us here are convinced, we understand the life part of it, but all those people out there that are pro-abortion, I think that's the only message they've been hearing is about the baby. And they're like, who cares about some babies, just some plasma? They'll make up some reason not to care. But if the message was a little bit louder, abortion hurts women, just like, I don't know how many decades it took before, but they put that warning label on a box of cigarettes, warning, the Surgeon General has a germ, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the risk that you get from cigarettes and the risk that a woman incurs in an abortion, all of the emotional trauma, the physical trauma, all the things that happen to her down the road as a direct result of her abortion, it's horrific. And so I think abortion hurts women is a message that needs to be louder because people do care about women. And there's a lot of women out there who haven't had an abortion and so they're like, well, I guess choice is a good idea. But they don't know how horrible it is. So I'm just wondering, and I know you mentioned some women have already had abortions, but I mean, I'm just wondering how much you're doing to amplify abortion hurts women and get that message out there much louder.
Yeah, it's crucial. So every investigative video we do has the element of the woman who's a victim as well, and demonstrates that. I mean, these videos, these women are, it's horrific what they're saying that they'll go through it, but then also the risk of the abortions and the danger that these abortions can cause to women physically and in other ways. It's something that we need to get out more and publicize more. So I think there's two things going on there. First of all, as a public policy, we need to be speaking out, and especially if we are talking about funding the abortion industry or the abortion groups, you need to speak loud and clear that this is something that is actually hurting women as a whole, in every way, and it's not empowering them as a whole. So physically, emotionally, psychologically, mental health issues, but then also you have the way that it's hurting them in the whole system of our society because they're not actually being empowered. It's just leading to more grief and more suffering for them. But then also making sure that that message is quickly united with, at the individual level, it's a matter of justice as well for the child. So you're talking about true empowerment of the woman and true justice for the child. And beautifully, they work together because the true empowerment for that woman is finding a way to solve her problem so that she doesn't feel that she has to have an abortion. No woman walks into an abortion clinic feeling powerful. She walks into an abortion clinic feeling powerless. And she's in a position literally of complete vulnerability. I mean, think about how an abortion is done for a moment. They set her up, they're going, it's usually a male abortionist who actually has a history of sometimes sexual abuse and medical malpractice and you name it, because a lot in that profession, it's a seedy industry as is. And Gosnell, he was abusing women, he was killing women, he was hurting women, and many other abortionists like him. And that position is one of ultimate powerlessness. It's ultimate disempowerment. And if you're in a society where that's being elevated and held up as an example of power and as an example of women's rights, women's choice, then you have a system that's totally upside down, and that's what we need to be speaking to. So, thanks so much for having me this afternoon.
Bridget.
Oh yes. Okay.
I just wanted to go back to one point that you made because I think it was really important. You said there are 5 spheres.
You need to come up to the mic.
Yeah, 5 spheres of the culture
Yes,
that you all focus on,
Yes.
and one of them was the church.
Yeah.
And I think it might be helpful for us to understand what the other 4 are, because we all have intersections, I think, in all of those spheres. So if you can just kind of walk through those 5 spheres that you all try to impact, we could think in terms of how we intersect those spheres.
Sure,
as well.
absolutely. So we've got religion, media, and that's traditional media, and that's also entertainment media. It can be any form of news media. You've got education, so that's our school systems, our academia, our intelligentsia in the country. You've got the sphere of business. How many have I said so far?
4.
Media, religion, business, and then, of course, the one that we all know so well here, politics. So LiveAction in the last few years has worked heavily in media and politics, and we're going to be doing much more because, again, we're at 5%, as I say, we're 7%, but we're going to really be ramping up in the other spheres, particularly education and religion. Business is a tricky it's a tricky thing to unpack, but it's important. But all of these spheres, we need to get powerful, persuasive pro-life messaging and identity so that you can take that then to the way that you make choices in your personal life, what you promote in your communities, and of course what you go to the voting booth with.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Let me ask you one more.
Yes, of course.
I said the last one.
I'll take them, yeah.
You're a hardworking millennial. Who's your favorite conservative woman leader?
Oh, you mean dead or alive or in general?
Alive.
Alive. Oh, that's a good question.
If you have one.
Okay, my favorite conservative woman leader.
National figure.
Well, I don't know if she counts, but I'm really inspired by the example of Michelle Duggar, Mrs. Duggar, because she is a free, happy, empowered woman with 19 and counting kids who speaks her mind, who's unafraid to talk about her faith, And if she ran for office, I'd totally vote for her, but she probably doesn't have time.
That's so, you know, 4 of our girls just wrote a book.
Okay.
They're going to speak first, and they're going to be in our calendar next year
Oh,
with you.
good. Okay, I'm honored. Awesome. Thank you so much.
What a great talk. We have some gifts for you.
Oh,
Can't leave yet. Can't leave yet. Just so you can see what you're in for when you're in our calendar. Here's our 2014
cool.
Great American
Thank
Conservative
you.
Woman calendar. She's going to be in there. Her
Awesome.
pictures are beautiful.
Thank you.
Our limited edition coffee mug, Claire Booth Luce with her famous saying.
Love it. No good deed goes unpunished. Of
And
course.
a tote bag to carry all your gifts in. Yes.
Thank you. Never can have too many tote bags.
There you
All
go.
right.
And from Heritage, because we're a think tank, we always like to give books. And this one, Heritage Foundation is a full spectrum conservative organization. We do the national security and the economic policy. But as you all know, we also address the culture, the marriage issues, and the life issues as well. So I want to just give you a copy of a conservative classic by Frank Meyer, In Defense of Freedom.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you for
thanks for
having
coming
me.
today.
Thank you so much.
We've got lunch.